My name is Peter Bond, and what I'm going to talk about is how small companies can find interesting niches in international business. You don't have to be a big company. But first, I'll just say a couple of words about BritishBins, which is our company. We're based in London. We have about £3 million turnover or something just over that, and we've got 6 people. So we're really at the micro end of small companies. And what BritishBins does, it's a stockist and reseller and distributor of wheelie bins and recycling containers and all sorts of equipment around solid waste and managing solid waste. And we, over the last 2 or 3 years, have done several £1 million worth of export business. Basically, not extensively running around the world, but basically from sitting in South London. So we just really want to talk a little bit about how that works. So I think the first thing to say is don't overanalyze things. It's really surprising what works, and it really isn't logic that tells you what works. You have to just kind of get out there and see what happens. Now you could spend a huge amount of time strategizing about certain types of products and certain types of markets and whether Kazakhstan is going to buy this, or Romania, or Nigeria, or Ghana, or whatever countries that you supply to. But you never really know. It's a very random situation. And similarly with traditional exports, you go into a market and you look at distributors and agents and the layers, and you form some sort of strategy about how to attack the market. But actually, you just be open and see what goes on. You really just have to try things out, have a go, see what works, and really just use the advantages of a small company to be flexible and open to what you're doing. It's really just about trying things out and having a go. Nevertheless, some things shouldn't make any sense at all. You shouldn't really be able to ship one wheelie bin to Kazakhstan. It shouldn't make any economic sense. But it's happened. We've quite often supplied 2 or 3 recycling containers to Saudi Arabia when a product worth £50 has had a £500 air freight. Very odd. People are willing to do odd things. And for some people, every last penny is important. For other people, just getting the product they want is important, and the money isn't important at all. So, clearly you're not going to focus on things that are just apparently completely crazy, but it's worth giving things a go and just being open to things. But you have to be careful a bit. There's lots of sharks out there. Everyone's heard of kind of Nigerian fraud, and we get a lot of fraudulent approaches from Hong Kong, all over the world, the Middle East. So some people that come in the door and contact you are clearly just crooks. They're clearly after just some sort of advance fee or some sort of deal. So again, you just have to keep your wits about you and try and avoid, well, definitely avoid, not try and avoid the bandits that are out there. And you can have a good laugh about these things very often. So if we're sitting in South London with a little company, how do we end up with contracts? We supply hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of products to Iceland, to Nigeria, to various Middle Eastern countries, North African countries. How does that happen? And surprisingly, a core of our business in the UK is Google. We're very good at Google in terms of natural positioning and how to use Google CPC in the UK. But it does work remarkably well internationally in terms of the cost per click side of Google when you pay for things. And you have to understand it. It's not particularly complicated, but you have to look through and understand what you're doing with Google, targeting particular countries, making sure you get the language settings correct, making sure that you're limiting how much you're spending in various areas. And our domestic spend in Google is thousands of pounds a month, and we spend a lot of money on Google. Internationally, we spend maybe 100, 150 pounds a month, but it's out there, and that being on Google with the right country settings, the right language settings, the right structure, has brought us very decent returns. So Google's a really good starting point. Surprisingly, if people find you to start with on Google or from events like this or various ways, but people internationally use chat a hell of a lot. And you wouldn't imagine that you could start with, we have chat on our website. You get a chat from someone who's speaking, quite unclear English. And 3 months later, there's £100,000 in your account, and the guy's actually turned out to be real, and as a real businessman, and has a different style. But he starts off with, just a Hotmail account and a hello on your instant chat, and that's the tools he has sitting out in the boonies somewhere. But he's a real person, and it really works. And you wouldn't imagine. You'd think, well, this is so unprofessional, but actually, those sort of things work very well. Sorry, let me move it down a slide here. There's a normal list of things that you do in terms of marketing, and it's not really worth going through them. We do a bit of PR, we do a bit of print advertising. Clearly this is PR, me talking here, which is absolutely fine. And you look for synergies in things. And try and avoid spending lots of money, but working efficiently in terms of what you do, and just being open to things. So, in a big company, and we source things from big companies quite often, put on 10% and resell them internationally. And you think, well, why doesn't the person we're selling to just go to the big company in the first place? Where's the logic in coming to us? And really, it's because it's very, very difficult for people, based in various countries around the world, to cold call and approach, large, substantial, multi-million pound, dollar, euro companies and get treated seriously. And, the advantage of the little guy is that you can respond to them, and very often, you can empathize with them. We're a small company working with them, which are probably small family companies themselves, and that works. And so you've got to play to the advantage of the small companies. And as I said, people have lots of challenges in terms of what is available as their tools to contact people and to start things going. And you just have to be empathetic about how difficult it is and what their issues are and how things work for them. Sorry, loads of time. I can go on a bit sometimes. And you don't, in a large company, you've got an export department and export managers and things like that. With a small company, you just make quick decisions, you move on, you get things wrong. You're never going to be right all the time. You just have a go and see what can work. It sounds simple, but of course I mentioned fraud earlier, and probably, 2 or 3 times a month, someone approaches us who appears to be serious, might be credible, and weaving your way through the story. Eventually, at the end of the story, is to bid for this contract in this particular place, or to register to do business in this country, or to be able to process documents or something, you have to put some money up front. You know, it may be a few £100, it may be a few £1,000. Never, ever, ever do it. It's always wrong. You know, you don't have to do it. Anyone that's credible, if there was anything local, they have to do it. They have to pay for it. You just have to be, you know, aware that, you know, that's the way some people approach business, and that's their only objective. Moving on a little bit, you know, you've got some sort of, here we go, hang on, some sort of deal. You're talking to someone, you know, you may have something worth, yeah, 100, 200,000 pounds, and, you know, you would normally imagine a deal with that sort of value. You'd have a decent contract, you'd go to lawyers in this country, you'd structure everything, you know, you'd have all these terms and conditions, and lawyers happily in this country will take your money for doing deals like that. It's not worth it. It's a complete waste of time. Sorry, you're probably having trouble reading this in the light. Complete waste of time. You know, it doesn't really matter what the contract is. You don't need, and it's irrelevant and it's unhelpful, the normal miles of force majeure clauses and definitions and all that stuff. It's just money burnt out. What you do need is a few bullet points, maybe a half a page or a page, just a very clear understanding, a definition, what you're supplying, what the deal is, what the terms are, you know, whether there's any in-country work that you're committing to, whether there's warranties, training. Really, really simple, really precise bullet points. That's it. Just so that between you and your customer, you know, the understanding is crystallized. It's going back to the early days of contracts and avoiding all the flim-flam, because none of that is really going to actually help in practice. The key thing is, though, of course, getting paid. You know, it's very easy. Lots of people make lots of mistakes about money and spend a lot of money trying to do deals that don't really work. Anything small, and these numbers, of course, that I put up here are just very averages, but say, you know, anything in the hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands, 100% up front. Nothing else is worth the effort and the time and the involvement. If someone's not going to pay you 100% up front, money, real money in your bank account, don't ship anything, don't do the deal. For smaller values, it's just not worth the effort. When you're getting into the mid-range, and I'm suggesting that the mid-range here is maybe up to 200, 250 grand, then you can start, you know, it's understandable that there's some protection on both sides, that the guy, your customer, wants protection as well. And so in those sorts of situations, some sort of documentary credit, some sort of work around bills of lading is absolutely reasonable and makes sense. And it's still very simple. In most cases, something like a 30% down payment, so that if the final 70% doesn't come, you have enough money to get the goods back into your possession and, you know, not make a huge loss of it. And, you know, 30% tells you that someone's got money, they're serious. So, you know, in the mid-range of value, then getting a down payment, a decent down payment, and having the rest against bills of lading is what makes sense. And when I say against bills of lading, when you load a container, when you load a ship, you get a negotiable piece of paper called a bill of lading. And that bill of lading means that you can only get those goods at the other end with those negotiable bills of lading. And you can show your customer a draft of that, and so you can have the official bill of lading when I get the rest of the money, the other 70% or whatever. And that works very well It's very simple, very straightforward, and we use that a lot in the mid-range contracts. Everyone's heard of letters of credit. It's, a standard form of export documentation. It's expensive. It's expensive for your customer to put in place, to sort out. It's expensive for you to process. The banks take a whack out of it. So, for example, we recently did a $500,000 order, so some £300,000, and probably between us and between our customer, in total there was probably £6,000–8,000 worth of costs associated with that letter of credit. I mean, serious money. So letters of credit, very traditional way of securing contracts, securing payment, but it really has to be a decent-sized contract to make that work. It doesn't work on small contracts at all. And when you're getting up into those sorts of documentation, I was very skeptical about contracts and lawyers involved in contracts. I'm saying with contracts, keep it really simple and just between you and your customer. Excuse me. With letters of credit, these are, multi-page, complicated documents. Unless you're extremely used to them and extremely familiar with them, you need professionals. And they're not lawyers. You need to go to professionals who deal with letters of credit. And that's all they do. And so when you get, you ask for a letter of credit, you get a draft, and you get 10 pages of stuff that is quite complex, quite difficult, seems irrational, is not quite clear, has a whole mass of confusing requirements. You won't figure it out. You might if you've got the background, but most people won't figure it out, won't have the expertise. So you go to a specialist letter of credit company that'll charge you a few £100, and they'll go through the letter of credit and say, all these weird things are normal, although they appear to be completely irrational, but there's this point and this point and this point that has to be changed. So use a professional for the draft, and I can recommend people, but also use professionals, the same professionals for submitting documents. The deal with a letter of credit is you submit the shipping documents and a bunch of other specific detailed documents to the bank, and automatically you get the money, provided you've got the documents absolutely right. Every dot and comma is absolutely right. And again, you're not going to do that as amateurs. You've probably maybe seen a few letters of credit in your life, if ever. Go to the professionals who do that, and they produce, for example, an invoice or a packing list or something like that, and you look at it and you think, that's rubbish. That looks so unprofessional. That's just a Word document with a list of points on it. We would never produce an invoice that looks like that. Doesn't matter. They've produced it with the right points on that the bank can see and understand and tick off exactly in the way they do, so that they will automatically put, a few £100,000 or whatever into your account without the customer being able to influence the situation. So it's, with letters of credit, they're a great mechanism. Obviously by far and away the majority of international commerce is done that way, but go to the right guys to help you make those work. And then it really is possible, as I'm saying, for a small guy, a little company to do big business with people they've never seen before on the other side of the world. It does work. You have to be a little bit careful, even though you've got a professional, you've got advice with documentation. It does help to make sure you understand the timing of things. If you've got a time to get some documents in, and it takes time to get them from the boat and from the shipping company, you need some nice fat margins in there for time, because if you just go an hour over or a day over a date of something within the letter of credit, then you're put in a position of having to ask your customer for an extension or a change, and that's completely changed the balance of power of a letter of credit. What a letter of credit does is give you automatic payment, and if suddenly the customer can then influence things, then he's got a lever against you. So make sure that if you ever use a letter of credit, that you're comfortable with the timing and how things are done. As I said, you'll get this great long list of documents, and the professional letter of credit guys will help you through that. Some things, whether it's with bills of lading or even cash of payments or letters of credit, things like certificates of origin, EU certificates of origin, Arab certificates of origin, there's all sorts of particular documentation. And there's loads of people out there that'll take your money to produce these things. Almost all of them these days you can do online, self-certify, fill them out. All these old days of getting notary publics and all that stuff is all gone. So just look online, and much of the documentation that you need can be done. I think we're pretty much done there. I've left some time here for any questions. If there is anything, if you don't want to talk, I'll stick around for a few minutes as well here if you don't want to talk publicly about anything. There's feedback forms, I'm told, around I can see them from here. So if anyone wants to comment on the feedback forms, I know the organisers would like that so they can make things better in the future. Thank you very much for your time.